So let's talk about a potentially very nasty Leviathan Dreadnought loadout. How does this guy do when he's equipped with double Grav Bombards? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where today we're taking another look at the Leviathan Dreadnought, and in particular this loadout that I've seen a few people running now, blasting out some nice generalist damage output with a couple of Grav Bombards and Volkite Calivers. In this video we're going to talk through the Leviathan's datasheet in general, a few potential buffs and synergies to make it stronger in game, and then talk about it in comparison with the Redemptor Dreadnought. Let's jump straight into it. So at the moment in 40k, Leviathan Dreadnoughts cost 220 points, and with the relic keyword they will cost you one additional command point to field in your roster as well. For those points they're still relatively tanky, though nowhere near quite as strong as they were previously. They've got an 8-inch move, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength and toughness 7, 14 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 8 and a 2+ save. They're further reinforced with their adamantic shielding, which gives them a 5+ invul as well. They're certainly a bit more vulnerable to high AP weapons though than the previous version. You can mix and match any of their weapon options on both arms, of which they have 3 ranged weapons and 2 melee weapons. First up we have the trusty storm cannons. They're an extra 10 points in addition, and they essentially give you 8 autocannon shots at 36-inch range. Previously they had better AP and more shots at closer range, and were pretty much like Bleach, they'd be able to kill literally anything. Now with less AP and fewer shots, they really do fall into the autocannon niche just that little bit more, being far stronger against very light vehicles and hordes compared with the other options. The range is nice though, it does mean that they don't have to get too close and risk getting locked up in combat. The next option is the Cyclonic Melter Lance, which is really quite expensive at plus 20 points each. You would have to pay 260 points for a Leviathan with 2 of these. They do understandably provide some very heavy firepower. They're both heavy d6, strength 9, AP 4, damage d6, with the blast keyword and the extra damage melter rule. My main issue with them is the very short 18-inch range though. Basically these things are only going to be able to guarantee shooting against enemy targets on the front line. Your opponent has the potential to quite easily outrange this guy if it's really going to be a big issue for his heavy hitters. Don't get me wrong, against tanks and hard targets they'll do an extraordinary amount of damage, particularly if you can get them in the very short 9-inch melter range, and I'd still say they're certainly worth considering as salamanders. But for me I just don't think they stack up very well compared with the excellent Grav Flux Bombard, the focus of this video. Now what I like about the Grav Bombard is that it's 24 inches, and that extra 6 inches really does make a big difference to its threat range. Each of these is heavy 2d3, strength 8, AP 3, damage 2, but whenever you target anything with a save of 3+ or more, it has a damage characteristic of 3 instead. It's really not a lot worse than the Cyclonic Melter Lance. It's a bit worse against very heavy targets such as toughness 8 vehicles, but a bit better against Space Marines, in particular against 3 wound Gravis armor. The deal breakers for me though are the 24-inch range, and also the fact that this doesn't cost you any additional points. You can have 2 of these on your Leviathan for 220 points, and it'll average you around 4 dead intercessors or 9 wounds on a toughness 7 vehicle. These guns are pretty much bad news for whatever they target, though particularly so for Space Marine heavy infantry, which we are seeing a lot of about these days. At the moment I'd argue they're the most competitive arm loadout on the Leviathan. Finally we get to melee weapons, which you can choose the Siege Claw or Siege Drill. Both will be at a mighty strength 14, and the claws give you an extra attack, and the drill will give you enormously better damage against vehicles. I'd say that the melee weapons are worth considering. You could certainly take one Grav Bombard and one of this pair, and have a bit more of a dual threat Leviathan, a bit of shooting, but also some very nasty anti-elite damage on the charge. I wouldn't bother with 2 though, I just don't think that it's worth it compared with having the additional ranged weapon. Finally you have the option of 2 heavy flamers or 2 Volkite Calivers. The heavy flamers are fairly close range, though do provide a very decent amount of anti-infantry support, but I'm really quite interested in the Volkite Calivers. If you take this pair, which doesn't cost you any more, you get 8 shots at strength 5, AP 0 and damage 2, with the nice Volkite effects that any 6s to cause to wound will cause a mortal wound on your target. Volkite weapons don't tend to massively excel against any one target, but will do pretty much some reliable damage to anything in the game. Not too bad general purpose fire support weapons for a Leviathan stomping up the board. Out of the 2 I have to admit I do prefer the Volkites. Finally you do have the option to mount 3 Hunter Killer missiles, which can give you a bit of an alpha strike at 5 points each for 3 one-shot strength 10 weapons. To be honest, these can be quite a good deal in the Space Marine army, particularly if you fire them off at AP 3 on battle round 1, and obviously more so if you have other buffs for your Leviathan Dreadnought, say a Tech Marine hanging about. I'd say the Hunter Killers are kind of take or leave though, both sticking them on or leaving them off completely are both viable. Finally, in terms of keywords, the Leviathan doesn't have the core keyword, which means it won't get rerolls in the same way that Redemptors will. But interestingly enough, it does pick up the smokescreen keyword. This one can make it really quite tanky, as for 1 CP you can make it -1 to hit at range. Really nice to have another reactive defensive buff, particularly stacked upon the already great Duty Eternal for -1 damage. Overall, the loadout that has me most interested with the Leviathan is packing 2 Grav Flux Bombards, twin Volkite Calivers, and either taking or leaving the Hunter-Killer missiles. It gives you a very nasty dreadnought that can stack a brutal amount of wounds on any enemy infantry in the midfield. If I was to run said dreadnought, there are a few ways to get a bit more out of it. If you weren't using your HQs for something else, it could be pretty reasonable to include a Tech Marine or Master of the Forge. He can give +1 to hit for 1 vehicle, and a 220 point Leviathan packing a ton of firepower is a really good target for this. If he is upgraded to Master of the Forge as well, he can heal it for 3 wounds per turn, which on a pretty sturdy model with an invul save and Duty Eternal could be really frustrating for your opponent. Unfortunately, there aren't really very many other character buffs that will work on the Leviathan. It's not core for rerolls, and you can't use Might of Heroes on it to get it up to toughness 8. Again, that requires the core keyword, so it can only be put on core dreadnoughts. If it's being targeted down at range, then Smokescreen is really quite a handy stratagem to have. -1 to hit on your dreadnought will make it even more annoying to remove, and Armour of Contempt can give it a bit of a boost against mortal wounds. There's a few other powerful things within the codexes for the dreadnoughts. Iron Hands can give it a 6+ feel no pain, slower degrading on the damage table, and you can make the dreadnought a character and give it a warlord trait should you want to. Could be nice for using the warlord trait target protocols to give it a little bit more damage, or potentially give it a way to escape from combat and still shoot with the Student of History warlord trait. Ultramarines are handy for being able to walk out of combat with this thing. As those Grav Bombards are blast weapons, you're not going to be able to stay in combat and shoot them, so being locked up can certainly be a risk. Otherwise, Salamanders can give you their wound rerolls, and it combines quite well with their psychic powers, Fire Shield and Drakeskin. Dark Angels might be able to hit on 2s natively with Grim Resolve, though I don't know how many turns you'd be able to get that to apply. You will likely need to be moving with this thing to keep it in range. And if you're going successor chapters, Master Artisans and or Stealthy can both give it a little bit of extra damage and also toughness at range. For most chapters though, I think it would be pretty reasonable to buy him a Tech Marine with the Master of the Forge upgrade. He can follow him around while pinging off some shots with a heavy bolter, and is additionally useful if you've got a few more vehicles in your list. In terms of whether the Leviathans are really very good competitively though, they need to try and shape up against the strongest dreadnought, which at the moment I would say is the Redemptor. For 185 points, a Redemptor with a Macro Plasma, Onslaught Gatling Cannon and Icarus Pod provides quite a frightening amount of damage output at range, good durability, and also manages to be a melee death machine as well, particularly strong against vehicles. As dreadnoughts go, at the moment it's very much the one to beat. In terms of durability, the Leviathan does actually win out against most things. +1 wound, a 2+ save and a 5+ invul does make it slightly better against dedicated anti-tank, things like las cannons and multi-melters. It takes 5.1 las cannons to down 100 points worth of Leviathan versus only 4.6 for 100 points of Redemptor. Not the biggest difference, but it's even stronger against really strong anti-tank weapons, things with huge AP like multi-melters. Perhaps even more important than this though is the smokescreen ability. It's really handy to be able to add something like a third to your durability if your opponent does decide that he really wants to focus this guy down. In terms of range damage, it's not too surprising that the dual Bombard Leviathan does win out against most things. Compared with the Macro Plasma Redemptor, it'll kill 5.2 intercessors compared with 3.5, or put 11 wounds on a toughness 7 vehicle compared with the only 6.5 from the Redemptor. Again, this isn't too unexpected really. The Redemptor does have a lot of its damage in close combat as well, though even at range it can still catch up quite a lot. Its guns are slightly longer range than the Leviathans, so it might have better choice of targets, and more importantly it does have the core keyword, meaning that you can easily field it in a castle of 2 or 3 Redemptors alongside captains or lieutenants, or you can think about using the Wisdom of the Ancient stratagem on one of the dreadnoughts to give them reroll 1s to hit or wound as well. I still think that the Bombard Leviathan does win in a shooting contest, though if you are building a bit of a Redemptor castle with support characters, it's a lot more close. Finally, in melee, as we mentioned, the Redemptor might not be quite as tough, but with its crazy D3+3 damage Redemptor fist in close combat, it is going to go through vehicles like butter. The Leviathan, on the other hand, is kind of uniquely weak to melee. It really doesn't want to get incidentally locked up and have those bombards shut down for a turn, meaning I think you'd need a lot more thought with playing a Leviathan than playing a Redemptor Dreadnought. Being able to function in multiple phases is really important in 9th edition, and I think it is one of the main reasons that we see more Redemptors about than Leviathans these days. Overall, I'd say it's a reasonable win in terms of durability for the Leviathan, a small win on the shooting front, but quite a heavy loss in terms of melee. I generally say it's just a different flavour of Dreadnought. If you want decent shooting and melee, go for the Redemptor, and if you want a dedicated, very tanky gun platform, then go for the Leviathan, particularly if you have a bit of protection against falling back and shooting, such as Ultramarines can get. So let me know what you think of the Dreadnought with Grav Bombards. Could he potentially be a competitive Space Marine unit going forwards, or is he just not worth the consideration when Redemptors are quite so strong now? Look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly be keeping the 40k Tactics videos coming every day, including a whole load of Space Marine content. If you are enjoying regularly, I'd just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which is how I can afford to keep these videos coming quite so often. If you would like to help support, channel patrons do get a fair few advantages. You get to see certain videos early, there's regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and you get automatic entry into the Auspex Tactics prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.